Well, hi, everybody. Everybody's loading into the room. Thanks so much for being here today for this wonderful webinar from CBI. I'm Sam Laprade. I know a lot of people are having a beautiful weather day today. I'd love to know where you're coming from today. I'm in beautiful Ottawa today, and feel free to throw in the chat where you're coming from. This is one of my favorite parts of our webinars here every month, to see where we're coming from all over the country. I have the pleasure of doing these webinars every single month, and it's the highlight of the month for me. We can see lots of people coming in today. Calgary, Alberta. How are you, Calgary? Thanks, Sandra, for being here today. Appreciate it very much. Feel free to throw in where you're from as you start to load into the room today. Beautiful BC. Is it Kootenay? Am I saying that right, Amy? Is it Kootenay? Amy will tell me if I'm right or not. Yes, yay. Thank you so much, Amy, for coming. Okay, we've got the West covered. Where are my friends from the East? Where are we coming from? Toronto. Hello, Mark. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you being here. We've got Matthew Rymer joining us today. We're going to be talking about everything risk management and legal today. So it's going to be a really important day. The Lanark Highlands, one of my favorite places. Fredericton, New Brunswick, another favorite of mine. Had a wonderful dinner in Fredericton a few years ago. Lovely to see people from all across the country. Feel free to, if you're just joining us, just jumping in the chat, feel free to pop in where you're coming from. We always get a kick out of who's coming and where they are in the country. Lots of different perspectives today. We're going to have an opportunity to speak with the one and only Hannah Rockburn in a couple of minutes. As I mentioned, Matthew Rymer's here today. We're going to talk about risk management and legal to keep you up to date on all those good things. I might share a few fundraising stories, a few nonprofit stories with you as well today. From beautiful Kingston, Ontario, just down the road. We're about 2 hours away, Michelle, from you. Michelle Kehoe joining us today from Kingston. Thanks so much for being here. Feel free to let us know where you're coming from today. We appreciate it very much. Appreciate you joining us. We're going to get started with the amazing Hannah Rockburn. She really is the glue that keeps us all together. There she is. Hello, Hannah. Hannah's giving us a short presentation today from the Capacity Building Institute. Turning it over to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Sam. Perfect. So I'll just share my screen for you all. Once again, my name is Hannah Rockburn, and I'm calling from Capacity Building Institute. We provide training, coaching, and mentorship support to staff and volunteers in the environmental sector across Canada. We are one of 5 nonprofit organizations that work close together to help build capacity of environmental nonprofits across Canada. And collectively, we all work under the umbrella called Sustainable Capacity Solutions. And we just strongly believe that it's the small shop, local grassroots organizations that do a lot of the on-ground work and empower their local communities to take action against climate change, whether that be through community gardens, retrofits, activism, policymaking, etc. And our mission as a whole for Sustainable Capacity Solutions is to be able to support these types of grassroots organizations by providing the necessary tools, resources, and training that they need to overcome all these common barriers that are faced by everyone working within this sector. So we believe that training matters, and it helps keep our organizations well-staffed, fully compliant with any laws and regulations, and effective in their game-changing work. So with CBI specifically, we want to provide this equal opportunity and access to capacity building training for every small shop nonprofit organization across Canada. Currently, how we do this is through a couple different programs. So we have our Capacity Building Certificate Program, which is focused on executive directors and senior staff at organizations. That runs from June to November, and so this is part of that. We also have our intern training program, so that targets more emerging leaders that are just getting into the nonprofit sector to learn more about how it works and working on communication and fundraising strategies, and more as like an intern level. And then we also currently have this new program opportunity that I want to talk about. It's our engaging senior leaders in the Canadian environmental sector, where we want to match seniors, experienced leaders in the sector, with a nonprofit organization within the Ottawa area specifically, to join a board for a 1-year term. And then you will also get some specific board related training, some resources and a toolkit. We'll be having an in-person workshops here at our office space in Ottawa. And that will just allow not only for that background in the training of being on a board, but then also you get to communicate and you get to contribute to your local community here in Ottawa. So this is running, it's launching as of this month in October, and it's going to run for at least until the end of June, potentially for a full year. So if you are in the Ottawa area or know someone that might be interested in this program, or if you're a part of an organization that's looking for board members in the Ottawa area, we highly encourage you to reach out. There is an application form on our website that you can reach out and fill out if you're interested in either being an employer or as a senior participant in the program. We have our amazing leaders and lead trainers as part of our training. So we have Sam here tonight. We also have Rob, Barb, and Alex that have various different experiences within the nonprofit sector and all contribute to our training in different aspects to give you more insight there. And then just a quick thank you to our funders that help fund our programs, that allow for you guys to participate and to be able to afford the training and that we can deliver this for you. So currently we want to thank the Ottawa Community Foundation, the City of Ottawa, the Sustainable Capacity Foundation, as well as Suncor Energy Foundation. And we always encourage you guys to contact us if you have any related training or questions, inquiries about capacity building, or if you just want to chat with us. There's lots of different ways to get a hold of us, through email, through our website. We have a phone line. And if you happen to be in the Ottawa area, we have a shared office space at Billings Avenue, which is down by the Pleasant Park bus station. As well as we ask you to save the date. So our next webinar is in November. So November 6th at 4 p.m. Eastern, we will be touching on the topic of leadership and organizational culture. So we'll have Rob Barnes join us for that conversation, as well as a potential other guest speaker to help give a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens to that as well. So we highly encourage you to sign up for that webinar if you haven't already. And with that, I will pass it back over to Sam.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I appreciate that overview very much. Okay, risk management and legal issues. I want to introduce Matthew Rymer. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Sam.
Thanks for being here today. Appreciate it very much. Tell me a little bit about your career, Matthew.
Well, I am about 5 years at the bar, so a lawyer for about 5 years, and getting close to 2 years now on my own, working as a sole practitioner, and more through a online legal platform known as Good Lawyer, which connects nonprofits and business people with lawyers that can help with their specific needs.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Before we go any farther, I know many of you are joining us today across the country. Some people were acknowledging Truth and Reconciliation Day today, and some people may have participated in different activities on Saturday. But I did want to acknowledge today that the City of Ottawa, where I am currently, honors the peoples and the land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. And the city, of course, honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in their valuable past and present contributions to this country. I wanted to share that before we went any farther today. Matthew, where are you coming from today?
So I am in Edmonton, Alberta.
Beautiful Edmonton. I was just there a little bit earlier this year. That's wonderful. What do you think is one of the biggest myths, Matthew, when it comes to risk management overall in your mind?
I think there are probably quite a few myths that people buy into, but one key one is that risk management is something you do when you're starting up, and then once you have everything set, you're good to go. And it's certainly helpful to go through the process early on, but it's always important, whether quarterly or annually or periodically, to look at your risks, to reevaluate, and to see what you have going forward.
Yeah, and let me ask you this, is it around times of growth as well, or changes within an organization?
Certainly, whenever you have a change in purpose or in the work you're doing, trying something new, maybe there's a key leader that's left or someone that's joined you, very important to take another look at risk management to see what the risks are. And I mean, if someone's left, did they leave you all the passwords? Was there anything they were responsible for, like the onboarding and the closing out their time with you, depending on the context, is very important.
Yeah, that transition time can be so challenging for so many of us, and we know this sector is a sector that has a lot of turnover, right? So it's something that is important for us to keep top of mind, for sure. And sometimes we're only hearing about some of those sort of nightmare stories make it to the media, but there's lots of stories that would never make headlines, but that we can avoid. Can you think of a couple there that people might be top of mind?
Well, excuse me. I see sometimes it is the nightmare stories that come to lawyers for help. There's lots of smaller issues that often can be resolved without legal help, but it can be as simple as compliance related. And I mentioned earlier today about a new client of mine that forgot about annual returns, and it's resulted in their company being struck. So it can be something very seemingly minor that can have a big impact, and it doesn't have to be a major lawsuit or a major division or split within the company or within the nonprofit.
Yeah. So let's take it bare bones for a second. In terms of risk management, define risk management for me.
Well, risk, it can be defined different ways, but I would think of risk as negative or dangers to your organization that are unwanted. So risk management, and each organization might define risk a little bit differently, but risk management I see as identifying what risks your organization faces. And I mean, that may be done at the board of directors level. You might have a specific committee, depending on the size of the organization, it could look a little differently, but identifying risks and assessing them, evaluating them, looking at how serious the risk is to the organization and how likely it is to happen. And there can be a few other metrics, a few other considerations there, but assessing them to decide which ones you need to take action on, which ones need to result in some change. Some risks can be mitigated, some can be avoided altogether if you're proactive. And some, I mean, insurance is not itself the answer to risk management, or it shouldn't be your sole approach, but whether or not you're mitigating risks, sometimes things do happen, and insurance can certainly help if you do have a sudden expense or you need the insurer to, I mean, can cover legal costs and different things if it falls under the policy.
And often, we think about organizations that might have been around a long time, and unfortunately I've been part of this scenario where, there was somebody that was around a long time and there was a lot of trust with that person, and therefore a lot of checks and balances had gone, weren't done. Let's put it that way. I'm trying to be as kind as I can. And therefore, 4 or 5 years after I got there, there was sort of some stuff uncovered. And then that led to some litigation, to be honest. So I think we have to, that's something we have to really think about, right? In terms of the checks and balances that we would have in an organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's often, too often, I think, in the nonprofit sector, you have incidences of financial mismanagement, whether intentional or accidental. And the checks and balances, if those can be in place, then that can greatly minimize or reduce the risk of serious consequences if someone is stealing money or if there's major accounting issues. And if your organization has to do regular audits, then that is then you won't go years without knowing there's some serious issues. But there's a lot that can be done. Whether or not you trust people, those systems can be put in place so that no matter who is in that position, and maybe it just having signing authority, maybe you need two people to sign checks instead of just one, and there can be different things that can reduce the risk of someone taking money.
Yeah. What do you think is the main reason then that nonprofit leaders would be up at night, that leave us sleepless?
I think maybe everyone watching would have a better idea of what my perspective may be skewed a little bit by coming at it from the legal side, but for the older nonprofits, I think often you have your founding documents, you have your bylaws, the rules of the organization and the authority that you're supposed to be acting by, and that is here. But over the years, the way people do things can drift a long ways from that. And so, do you really have the authority? It could be elections of directors. You can have all sorts of things that, if they're not carried out properly, could put you at risk. And if everyone is happy working together, that's not an issue. But if you have someone within the organization that is wants to create a conflict, there can be some huge issues there.
Yeah. And a reminder to everybody, and some people have already jumped in there, which is fantastic, with some great questions, which we'll get to in a few minutes. So if you have a question, you can pop it in the Q&A, and we're able to share those. And I'm happy to get to those as well as we work through some of the prepared questions we have for today. Why is it so important, Matthew, that we're proactive and not just reactive?
Well, I think the effort it takes to be proactive is far less than what it takes to be reactive, and dealing with the damage of reacting after the fact, depending on the risk. Like many things, like health and taking care of yourself, or your vehicle, so many different things. It's often, although you have to be intentional about it, it's often far better to do the regular checkups and to make sure you're putting the effort in as you go along to avoid the serious consequences. So risk management, in terms of identifying and assessing the risks and taking corrective courses or steps, is may to some seem like it's distracting from the work of the organization, but really can help prevent the catastrophic or the serious incidents that can really undermine your work. So I think being proactive is it's very much can be part of furthering the mission, furthering the purpose of the organization, by making sure you have that firm foundation and watching out for, say, the little cracks in the foundation that could become something big if you don't take steps.
And when you think about some of the people you've worked with over the last couple of years, obviously keeping all of their information confidential, but what are some of the big issues that that have sort of come your way in the last couple of years, keeping in mind that, there was the pandemic? I mean, did that add some complexity there?
Well, the pandemic certainly added here in Alberta. Well, in each province, in their own way, they've reacted to an extent, but there's great confusion in terms of holding meetings, whether it be AGMs or board meetings even, and depending on the province, whether they're allowed to meet electronically or by telephone, whether they're allowed to vote unless they're in person. And so each province had slightly different approaches, but it created a lot of confusion and risk in terms of did we go about things properly? And in Alberta, it depended, like there's some temporary steps taken provincially, but then if your bylaws didn't allow for it, you still were kind of left out in the dark. There's different situations. So the pandemic, I think, left a lot of boards in particular very uncomfortable and sometimes needing to delay elections or having questions or having members question, oh, you didn't go about that right, so now what do we do? And it created a huge mess.
Does it leave people vulnerable when there's no terms for the board, for instance?
I think it depends. Well, if there's no terms, it may be less of an issue. If depending on, I mean, on the provincial legislation, the max that a director is allowed to serve before being reelected, but it yeah.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of boards that, like I worked for an organization and someone had literally been on the board for 27 years. Literally 27 years. So I just always wondered if that was something that left people vulnerable.
Oh, I see. More generally, I was thinking of the pandemic related side of it, but yeah, it comes down to the importance of creating the rules that you want for your organization. If you're starting out, or if you've been around for a long time, whether you should work to change them, because you can structure it so that a few people or even one person really has all the power and it's very hard to change. And so someone could end up being on the board forever and it can become really hard to get rid of them. And for everyone else, it could undermine the mission, or it could create a huge conflict or succession issue. It could be the other way around though too, where you have kind of hostile takeovers of divided members. And so it can be really, when things are going good, you may not realize the ins and outs. You may not think about the ins and outs of the rules that you have in place through bylaws, usually through bylaws, but it can be articles in other areas too. But when trouble arises, that, well, again, being proactive, whether with legal advice or just working through it as a board or a committee, you can spot some issues sometimes in advance and prepare for that.
And I noticed, Matthew, identifying and assessing different areas of risk, who should be at the table to be part of those discussions? Is it something that just senior leadership does? Do you get frontline people involved? Because I would think the frontline team may see things that the leadership may not see. Leadership is going to see things frontline don't see. Is this a collaborative effort, including board members?
I think, yes, it often will be a collaborative effort, or it should be. Board members, depending on the organization, may not be involved in the day-to-day work, but have hopefully a perspective that's valuable in risk assessment and ultimately are guiding the policies and the direction of the organization. So I think they certainly need to be involved, but the less they're involved in the day-to-day, the more they're going to have to be listening also to staff, executive director, to volunteers. And so you can approach it different ways, but hearing from them should certainly be, if nothing else, should be a factor in the risk assessment, if whether or not they're at the table and the further steps of the evaluation.
Yeah, no, it's really good. So talk to me a little bit about the first step. If someone has never done this before, where do you even start, Matthew?
Well, I realize we likely have quite a mix of different organizations from different provinces or federal nonprofits and some maybe charities. So the specific risks will look different depending on your circumstances. And if you're working with vulnerable people, children or otherwise, you're going to have some big risks to think about there. If you're working in on the activist side, environmental work, there's certain different risks and you have to consider that there's depending on the circumstances. So certain things such as compliance, corporate compliance with the appropriate legislation, compliance with the CRA that taxes nonprofit status or charitable status, employment issues, like there's certain things that most people will need to consider as risks, and then there's certain other ones that'll be very unique to your situation. But if you're depending on your source of funding, if it's you want to think about what risks are there if you are dependent on one source, whether it be grant or otherwise, then I mean that's a risk perhaps in itself, but you also need to be aware of any strings attached, any restrictions on the funding and any reporting requirements and follow that through. The employment side, do you have the right policies in place regarding anti-discrimination, harassment, bullying, and so forth, and training if possibly too. So I guess you could break it down into the different parts and consider what risks are under that category, whether it be the financial side, the compliance, like the more general corporate compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Privacy, cybersecurity is a huge one, and depending on who you have involved with your organization, it could be completely a foreign concept if you don't have anyone very tuned into IT matters and
Right.
So, and there's other categories as well, but I think if you're starting out, you want to brainstorm, before you're working through all the like assessing specific risks, think through a way to identify, brainstorm a bunch of risks and make that list first, and then consider each one. Some may be not a huge concern and you don't have to take any steps, but.
And let me ask you, when do we know we need outside help? Like when do we know that, hey, listen, I think we've got our ducks in order, but do we need something else to someone else with expertise like yourself, Matthew, to lead us along?
I think there's much that can be done internally. Again, it depends on the skills and experience of those involved. So if you have, and sometimes you'll have, and as much as possible, it's great to bring in experienced board members and in your field, but also some may have some experience in the legal or accounting side that can help in those areas too. But so much can be done internally, but if you ever feel like you're not, you don't have the answers, I mean, for example, the different compliance, each jurisdiction has surprisingly different legislation in place for nonprofits, much more so than the for-profit sector.
geez.
And it's confusing. Like there's no way about it. So you look up anything online and how do you know that's for your province or like it can be hard to, as much as it's always a bit of a dangerous thing to look online. I mean, you have to take some precautions when searching online. It's even harder when you have all these differences and compliance issues. And so if in doubt, I'd say talk to a lawyer, talk to an accountant, depending on the issue. Consider a periodic review of your risk situation with a conversation with a lawyer, or maybe a look at your foundational corporate documents, bylaws, etc., that to make sure they are what you think they are, or they fit your current mode of operating. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a big issue. Like it doesn't have to be litigation or something that is a huge commitment. It can be an hour conversation sometimes that could be helpful.
I've just came up with your advertising tagline. You might want to use it. I don't know if you're going to like it or not. But when in doubt, give Matthew a shout. Does that work? Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's great to be able to reach out to, and just to put our own mind at ease sometimes, right? I mean, I've had to do that as well, to being a nonprofit. Whose desk does it ultimately sit on? Whose desk does risk management ultimately the buck, to use I can't even believe I'm saying this, but to use a line from the premier, the buck stops here. Whose desk does it stop with?
Well, I mean, for each organization, I think it all ultimately falls on the board of directors. Even as I said, they may not be doing a lot of it. They may be somewhat hands-off, more at the high level direction setting and policy making, but really it is it's not up to individual volunteers or staff or managers to in the end it goes to the top. And I mean, depending on the relationship with officers and directors there and the authority, there could be some nuance there, but essentially the directors are responsible.
Okay, good to know. We've got lots of great questions coming in. A reminder, if anyone wants to ask Matthew a question, to go ahead and throw it in there. We've got lots here, so I'm gonna start in terms of the chat. I know we've got some in the Q&A as well. Nicholas has indicated some great insight, Matthew. A local nonprofit I know of unfortunately encountered an issue like that where the insurance company wouldn't cover the risk they experienced. So it's about knowing what you're insured for as well, right, Matthew?
And so if you can get on friendly terms with the insurance agent, I mean, as much as we can think that they just want to sell us more and more coverage, sometimes it can be really helpful to have someone talk you through the ins and outs of what you're covered or what you have coverage for. And I don't know the specific area of non-coverage here, but certainly if you're exposed in an area, if you can't get coverage, that really, and it's a risk that if there's some likelihood of it happening, you may really have to think about what we can do. That, I mean, if that's going to sink your organization, do we have to just not do that activity at all, or how do we approach that?
Yeah, excellent. Steve asks, Matthew, what advice would you give an organization who's just forming? What are the secrets to successfully incorporating a nonprofit?
Well, I think it is, I mean, whether in cooperation, whether working with a lawyer or not, building a really strong foundation and having the rules that you want in place in terms of bylaws, especially. But in some ways, it's easier when you're starting out than when your organization has been around for a number of years. You have things build up over time. It's hard to change things, but when you're starting out, you have this amazing ability to just make those choices, although you may not, of course, you might not have the experience yet to know which choices to make, but it's really a great opportunity to build the foundation you want, and things can be changed later, whether bylaws or otherwise.
Mm.
But choose what you want in terms of membership. How open do you want it to be? What restrictions on membership? Or is it going to be a very tight membership, essentially a self-perpetuating board that of directors that are the only members? There's a variety of options, but
Right.
if you're thinking towards charity, that you really need to be careful in how you draft your purpose, your objectives, and if you want to apply for charitable status. So that now is the time at the beginning to, if you're at all interested in that, thinking about how you word things as well.
I think a lot of nonprofits, especially to this point about just forming, it's that we don't know what we don't know. So it can be a bit scary. Are there any resources that you can share with us, Matthew, that may help us during that period, just to ensure that we're connecting with everything? Or are there any sort of templates that we can use, anything like that to sort of start the juices flowing?
I think each province will have slightly different resources, but there often are some helpful nonprofit resources available depending on the province. And I mean, Ontario, what's the full name? Community Legal Education Ontario has some good resources, including on transitioning to the new Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. And so nonprofitlaw.clio.on.ca is one for that goes kind of without maybe not going into super great level of detail, but has some useful information there for the basics. In Alberta, that each province will have slightly different ones.
Okay. Yeah, we've got people coming all the way from BC right to Fredericton and all the way in between today. So lots of different provincial jurisdictions there that people want to look inside their own for sure. I wanted to bring attention to another question. Lee is asking a great comment about risk and passwords. My apologies. Do you have any recommendations on how to keep sorry, I'm going to start all over again. Do you have any recommendations on how to make sure the people who need access have access when they need it, and how to keep others up to date when new passwords are created or old ones updated? Would it be helpful to use a password manager like Old Password? Is that safe? Lots of good questions there.
Yeah, passwords are, I mean, there's more and more, you hear more and more incidents of cyber attacks and hacking, and often the weak points can be just really basic passwords used by maybe just one individual, not necessarily a person with a lot of authority, but I mean, it could be the front desk and they use the same password for 100 different things that they're involved with. And so I don't know if there's an easy way I mean, there's different approaches, but I use a password manager personally. It's driving me a little crazy dealing with trying to have good passwords for everything. And I think more and more that while we still have passwords, and I mean, there's more and more talk of moving away from passwords to different ways of accessing things, but that we're not quite there yet. So password managers can be a great way to have more complex passwords while still being quite secure for them. And but at the organizational level, it gets more complicated when you have, because at individual level you could have a master password, but how does it work? I
Right.
think unless if you have IT support, they're probably the better one to talk to and can have administrative controls
Right.
to deal with that better. But if you don't have that, then it it can be a bit tricky, and I don't know that I have a great answer.
No, that's okay. That's all good.
Mhm.
James is asking, is there risk management for a project proposal? And this is an example. Is it too ambitious? When funding do you need to secure before initiating a project? Are we likely to get overwhelmed where there will be financial or another threat coming out of that? Does that make sense to you? Do you want me to read that again?
Maybe if you could read it once
Sure.
more.
So
Thanks.
I'll start here. So is there risk management for a project proposal? So is there anything risk assessment we should be looking at from a proposal perspective? Like, if we say, oh, we want to build a new building to house kids to do camp, so we can teach them all about the environment. And people say, oh, it's going to cost us $5 million. What's the proposal there and risk there?
And so are you the one making the proposal in that case?
Yeah, so it's basically looking for any sort of, I guess, some checks and balances around proposals and making sure that they're not too ambitious, for instance. They've got the foundation to sustain them.
I think a lot depends on the expertise within your organization. And if you do have, like, I should say it the other way, if you're not confident you have the expertise to say what can we actually do with this money? Like if you're worried about shortfalls, if you're worried about various other issues, then I think it's certainly important to get second opinions and get an outside opinion of your proposal, and however that may look depending on the details. But I think because nonprofits often are not working with a huge amount of buffer, like we often operate kind of close to the line.
Right.
And there may be exceptions. Some of you may have much more than that, but your risk analysis looks a bit different when you don't have a lot to cover you through turbulent times, and maybe you can build some redundancy, some emergency funds and processes into things. But I think there's need for a little extra caution when you have a lot at stake and you don't, like, if this fails, something goes sideways, that could sink the whole organization. You need to pay a little bit to get a second opinion or get some outside expertise for the sake of being cautious.
And we know that there's been data breaches, there's been endless different things that threaten the safety of our organization. A great question here. What privacy procedures and policy should be in place for protection of personal information for small nonprofits?
Well, there's a couple sides to it. One is, I mean, in general, everything privacy related is that you should get consent. I mean, generally, we don't want to store more personal information than you have to. But you also should be getting consent for any disclosure of personal information. So there's a mention of photos, which is, well, somewhat relevant there too. To get like my son in preschool, we gave consent for them to use his photo in different things, so that getting permission, getting consent, is just generally one of the key principles of privacy law, even though not all nonprofits are subject to the main privacy legislation. PIPEDA is the federal one, but in different provinces, sometimes the provincial one will apply. In Alberta, it can, but for the most part, that's related specifically to commercial matters and operations. So if you don't have kind of a commercial side, it may not directly apply, but it generally is very important. There can be other ways you can get into trouble with misusing personal information or using it without permission. And if and then storage is, of course, part of that too, in terms of taking reasonable efforts to protect the personal information you do store. Again, if you have someone with the IT expertise, then they hopefully will be able to help set up the systems you need. And I mean, if everyone's working remotely, if you have cloud-based storage, there's obviously different risks than some nonprofits may just have a filing cabinet and information on paper, which is quite a different situation. So it can vary a lot, but generally keep as little as possible, as little as necessary, and get consent for any disclosure. And even if PIPEDA, even if the most well-known privacy legislation doesn't apply, generally, I think that's wise to be on the safe side.
Yeah, for sure. And the question was asked here about photos. Another risk is using a photo for which you don't have permission or which you're not copyright, right? Big issue.
Yeah, so I think always ask for permission. Some people have the mindset that anything you see online, whether it be Instagram or elsewhere, it must be free for use for anyone else. And it yeah, not necessarily the case. Not that someone you may or may not run into any trouble, but there's countless sites. There's a number of sites where you can get good photos for free, that are clear that you can use them. I mean, usually you want to read to make sure your purposes match what the stock photo allows for, but there's a lot of ways you can be on a more solid footing there. And but generally, I think it's always, I mean, be on the safe side, and whether or not there's much risk of the photographer coming after you or sharing, or the person that's in the photo saying, "Oh, I didn't give my permission for you to put that on there." Always seek permission.
Sorry, I was coughing. I muted myself. What else would you share, Matthew, as I went so fast the time today. What else would you share before we sign off today that might be missing from the work that we're doing in our own nonprofits?
I think we've gone over a lot of the main ones, and I guess what else can I think of here?
I mean,
I do think, if at all possible, it's always helpful to, I think I mentioned it a little bit, but to bring on experienced board members, depending on your jurisdiction and how you're incorporated. You often you'll be required to have independent or non-employee board members anyway. So
Yeah.
I talked Hannah was talking about the certificate program where they train people to and put you in with a environmental NGO. So that sounds like a great way or an interesting tie into what I was thinking here. But whether it be through organizations like CBI or through other environmental NGO organizations, they're finding people that with experience and passion for what you are about with your organization can be very helpful, especially if you're starting out and the initial incorporators, like the people starting the organization themselves, don't have extensive experience. Bring on board some people with experience in your area or legal accounting. Like some of these areas of expertise can be very helpful to have on your board.
Yeah, no, for sure. Really, really good point. And I know today people are sort of thinking about their own organizations and in in the area that I work at, people can sometimes feel a bit overwhelmed about all the information we shared today, and it can feel a bit daunting. My advice always is just start somewhere. Is that the same advice you would use, Matthew, for risk management and legal issues?
Yeah, I think it can seem overwhelming and because you may in brainstorming or even if you look up a list of risks that nonprofits face, you can find long lists that may or may not apply to you, but that can seem overwhelming and you might want to just ignore that. And like your tendency might be to just give up on risk management, but as much as you can, whether it be broken up into smaller chunks, if it's a board doing it or a committee of the board, you can have a series of meetings and not try to push your way through the whole thing all at once, or you can go away and each brainstorm different risks or take a few to analyze or assess yourself. There's ways of making it smaller and more manageable. And again, be happy to have say an hour conversation with, like I can provide bite-sized legal advice to organizations that want a little bit of outside help if they want, and through Good Lawyer, I'd be happy to meet with any people that would like to do that.
That's very kind of you. James is just weighing in here. We just have time for this one last question.
Sure.
How do you manage the fact that you are a nonprofit, have little money with the recommendation using lawyers, etc., to minimize the risk? So they don't have a big budget, but they want to make sure that they don't, leave themselves open.
Well, I think I guess there's a couple sides to it. One is that it may cost less than you think to have a conversation with the lawyer. I'm not meaning doesn't have to be thousands of dollars. But again, this risk management or even building the foundation, if you're early in the process with your nonprofit, much can be done on your own. But if you and there are, sorry, I'm thinking out loud here and my thoughts are jumping around a little bit, but there are in some cases also sometimes different webinars or free legal advice in different ways that you can look into, different legal clinics, sometimes connected with law schools that can also provide some assistance and help. So if your finances are extremely tight, it might be worth looking into that as well to see if there's any other ways to get outside help without as
Yeah.
much of a cost.
I learned a lot from you today, Matthew. Thank you so much. Matthew, if someone wanted to track you down, how are we finding you?
So my website for my firm is rymerlaw.ca, rymerlaw.ca. Can be reached directly through that. I'll also, if I have access here, I'll share. So there's a booking link if you are interested in, if anyone's interested, I've been told by Good Lawyer I can offer oh, someone else is
Yeah, there's perfect right there.
putting a link there too. So
Yeah.
I guess it's not, yeah. So anyway, I was told that $100 off. So a normal, whether it be a legal strategy session or incorporation, variety of legal services that, or bylaws, different things that we can assist with, and be happy to help. I'm one of the lawyers, not the only one. There's some others as well with Good Lawyer that that work with nonprofits and would be happy to help.
Well, that's very kind of you. I appreciate that very much. And I know everyone on the call today, right across the country, will appreciate it as well. We had a number of people joining us today. I know a number of people had the day to sort of work, and some people were off today. So I'm glad to see so many people showed up to talk about risk management and, of course, legal issues. Thanks again, Matthew, for your time today. I appreciate it very much. We're coming back November 6th, everyone. I'll be here with a new topic. Hannah Rockburn, what are we doing November 6th?
We are going to be talking about leadership and organizational culture with Rob Barnes.
Well, look at that. That will be just as fun as we had today. Hoping to see everybody on November the 6th. So make sure you sign up today. Lots of thanks coming into the chat for you as well today. And even some, some emojis, clapping emojis, Matthew. So thank you. I don't think you get those in law very often, but let's give you some nice shout out today. I appreciate it very much. Lots of thanks coming as well for putting this on today. I'm Sam Laprade. We get to do this every single month. The topics range, and we're so happy to have all of you here. We couldn't do it without all of you. So definitely tell your friends. We're happy to have as many people on the call when we do this as every month as we can. CBI is always updating the list of what we're doing. So reach out and connect with them if there's a topic that you're interested in. I know they're thinking about 2024 already. So you can reach out and give out your ideas for 2024. We've talked about lots of different topics, but I know there's still lots on your mind. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And no matter where you are in the country, thinking about over the last couple of days, truth and reconciliation, and giving thanks to the land that we're on. We appreciate the opportunity today to come to you today from Ottawa and, of course, the land of the Anishinaabe people.